Now, going on to a couple of other minor issues, formalities. Um, I've often come across contracts to buy properties in Spain which have been written not in Spanish, but in the language in Swedish or in German or in English. Does that make sense?
It's got to be translated into Spanish in order to be make sense and in fact is accepted even a contract written in a different language. It will be binding for both parties if both parties have agreed to do it, but it will not really cause any legal effect if this is not translated into Spanish.
And of course, the other problem is that even though it's legally binding, if you have a dispute, it's all going to have to be translated for the judge. And you don't know what the translation is going to say because there are always differences, nuances in translation. So
Exactly.
it always strikes me as being a very strange decision if you're buying a property in Spain not to have a contract where one column is in Spanish and another is in your own language.
And in fact, actually, you can do a part of the transaction in a different language if you like.
Right.
This is very, very rare to be seen.
Yes.
But if there is a Swedish vendor that is selling the property to a Swedish buyer and they made a contract in between themselves,
In Sweden.
that's okay up to the signing of a contract. But if this is going to be ending, like this is going to be ending in a escritura, in the signing of title deeds in front of the notary will not accept this Swedish contract, but he will request and demand this to be in Spanish, because the land registry will only accept escrituras, so title deeds written in Spanish.
So you can have a private contract between you and your friend in Sweden and say, yes, I will sell you this property, but in order to get your ownership registered at the land registry, you have to have the Spanish escritura in Spanish.
Absolutely.
What about payment? What about if I say in my Swedish contract with my Swedish friend, the price of this property is 1 million euros, which I declare I have already received in Sweden? Is that permitted, or do you have to reflect a property price paid here?
You have to justify that. So in Spain, it's no longer possible to say the price is €1 million. I confess that I have received it. I confess that I've paid it. No, you've got to justify.
Show the money moving.
You have to document to the notary how the money is being paid.
Yes.
So in this sense, if going back to this example, if the Swedish buyer is doing a transfer from a Swedish bank account to a Swedish bank account, and the buyer is the buyer and the vendor is the vendor, and this really took place, this will be accepted by the notary, although the notary will possibly request a letter from the bank that will confirm that this transaction is absolutely right.
Yes. Now, sometimes that sort of arrangement can make sense if the parties are living in a country which does not use the euro. Because there are exchange costs both ways. But if you're living in a country that uses the euro, then really there's not much to be gained from it. There's a bit of money costs to transfer the money around the world, but probably simpler just to send the money out to Spain, pass it across in front of the notary, and then take it back again.
That's the usual way.
Yes. Talking about things that are no longer accepted under declarations. Now, when I started working in Spain, it was quite common for the buyer and the seller to agree that they'd only declare 10% of the true value. And of course, those days have now long since gone. Today, it's dangerous to make under-declarations, isn't it? To declare less than the true value of the property.
This doesn't happen anymore.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Yes.
It's gone. It's really impossible.
Yes, because of the money laundering requirements.
Because of all the regulations, because of money laundering requirements, because of the tax evasion that this will mean for the vendor of the property. It's not usual, and it's not in the mentality of anybody anymore. So it's not even requested, or it's not even considerable to be happening in Spain.
And even if you found you were buying a property in the middle of nowhere and the seller wanted you to under-declare, even if you did find that, it would still be a crazy thing to do. Because unless when you sell the property you can find another idiot to do that, you're going to face a huge tax,
Capital gain tax,
or capital gains tax on a gain you haven't really made.
Yeah, there really it will be a huge number of complications
It will be.
associated to that. So,
Yes.
well, really, first thing is how to move the money from out of Spain to Spain
Yes.
to pay this.
Yes.
You cannot travel with the money. You can transfer that money, but you cannot go to a bank and say, I want this amount of cash. That's not possible. So it will always be, from a practical point of view,
Yes.
it will be impossible.
So the advice is just forget it. Forget this ever used to happen. It isn't happening anymore. Just pay the full price.
Absolutely.
We talked about this a little bit, but in terms of the contract, if you're buying a house in Spain, the law that governs that purchase is going to have to be Spanish law. You can't make your escritura subject to the law of England or Germany or wherever
It's
it
got
might
to be according to Spanish law.
You mentioned off-plan properties, and you've said that the payment structure for those is different. We have a separate guide dealing with off-plan properties, so we can refer people to that for more details. But it is important to understand that if you are buying a property off-plan, you need to be particularly careful, because there are far more risks associated with it, in that what happens if the house doesn't get finished, is my money protected, and so on and so forth. So that's another little thing for the lawyer to advise you about.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. We can talk within the other specific guide, but in general, first thing you have to have is a building license. You have to have a planning permission to build that type of off-plan property, because you cannot sell what is not permitted to be happening. So if there is a contract that is selling you an apartment with the first D apartment with 200 square meters, and you don't have any planning permission yet,
Yes.
you can simply not sell that. You cannot sell that property, because that property is not permitted and therefore doesn't exist. So the first important thing is to see that there is a planning permission. Second is that the payments are guaranteed. There are two possible ways to do that: with a bank guarantee or with an insurance policy. But we can.
Now, this is a legal requirement in Spain. This must happen.
And this is a very old legal
It's back
requirement.
1962, I think.
From 1968.
68 was it? A long time.
The law 57/1968 was already regulating this. That has been, of course, amended a few times,
Yes.
but it's obligatory to deliver.
Because in the old days, nobody ever did it, whereas now it is what actually happens.
Yeah, because it was wrong interpretation that was by some developers said, okay, you can renounce, but this has been clear now. This is not a renounceable right of the buyer. So
Yes.
even if you as a buyer said, oh, I want to renounce to my right to demand my bank guarantee.
You can't.
No, you can't.
Yes. Okay, so that's more or less the process dealt with. What would you, after all these years' experience, say are the biggest dangers that someone needs to be aware of when they're buying property in Spain?
Well, there are quite a few obstacles that you can find within the process. I will pay attention to the size of the property, to the way that the property was permitted, to the way that the property was inspected, to the size of the property today, and to the final registration. I will investigate really the last actions by the town hall against that property to make sure that there are no issues. That's really happening. Reviewing the nota simple and reviewing who the owner is something that the system gives a very open protection because of the notary and by the lawyers. But this planning and zoning is really
difficult.
Quite difficult and quite important to be seen.
And of course, in the recent past, we've had all sorts of scandals in Spain, including here in Marbella, about planning consents that were given illegally by town halls and forged planning consents. The government has taken action on those things now. Many would say they haven't quite solved the problem, but it is now a much, much stronger situation in Spain, isn't it, than what it used to be 5-6 years ago?
It's a very strong situation, and we sadly had those problems in the municipality of Marbella, but there were a number of properties that were permitted within a time frame and those properties, as a result of those properties, this was left with a good number of properties with illegal or irregular situations. But this is not really happening anymore. That happens occasionally and exceptionally in some specific municipalities many years ago and within the time frame that some politicians were in charge. But it's not really happening.
And I think the important thing for the viewers to know is that if there is a problem like that, it will become apparent when your lawyers inspect the property. So the lawyer will be able to say to you, whoa, don't buy this property, it's illegal.
Absolutely. So if you do the legal searches, the due diligence carefully, and you are really requesting every single type of certificate, and you are careful about requesting additional documents, these type of situations are not happening.
Miguel, thank you very much. Very useful. If you'd like further help or advice from Miguel or his firm, you can contact them at the links on our information section. If you would like to see more guides about buying property in Spain, various types of property, or whether you're buying for investment or buying for retirement, again, there are links in the same place. We have video guides and we have written guides for you to have a look at. Your next step, well, if you're serious about buying a property in Spain, contact a lawyer as soon as possible before you get caught up in the excitement of the purchase, and then proceed in a sensible and cautious way. And that's really it. If you've enjoyed this video today, please like us or follow us. And whether you do that or not, we hope to see you soon back at Guides.global. Thank you.